Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to Receiving Nur Quran Feast, Ramadan Quran Feast. We are delighted to have another guest speaker today, Brother Mehmet Ali. And of our three guest speakers, he was the one who was most generous when I asked him about how to introduce him. And I'll take the liberty to go ahead and share some of the details that will give us a bit of an idea about our guest speaker for today. But he did tell me, actually, after having given these details, just tell me I am a brother trying to understand the Quran who lives in Bloomington, Indiana. In terms of his understanding and approach of religion and the Quran, Brother Mehmet Ali is really fascinated by Bediüzzaman Said Nursi's methodology and approach to the Quran, and he is interested in the dichotomy between science and religion, and also a way of talking about Iman, modeling of Iman in such a way that can answer the questions of today's world satisfactorily. His professional training and expertise is in education and language, which branches out into other related fields, such as the psychology of mind, cognition, philosophy of science, alternative assessment methodologies, and theories of learning and teaching. He's also, on the side, a professional photographer. On the side, just for our purposes, on the side. And he's also an enthusiast in web and graphic design. And he also, some of his hobbies include scuba diving and parachuting as well. He has 5 cute kids, and he currently lives in Bloomington and takes one day at a time to figure out what the meaning of life is. So we are very happy to have him with us today. Jazakumullah khair for kindly joining us. As usual, we will have the discourse with our guest speaker, and then after that we will have time for Q&A and comments. Jazakumullah khair, and Bismillah, brother.
Thank you, Isra. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Like Isra told you, my name is Mehmet, and upon the request of the Receiving Nur team, I have decided to share some of my thoughts, some of my questions along the way about how to understand Quran. Specifically, I have a certain term, a word in Quran that first, like I said, I'll tell you what I think about it. I also want you to think about it and tell me what you think. And at this point, I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen with you so that you can follow the PowerPoint presentation that I prepared for you. Okay, as the title suggests, this is hopefully will be this will be a collaborative attempt altogether, a project, so to speak, to understand a certain Quranic expression. I threw in some keywords in there. Hopefully, we'll be able to touch upon those as we go along the presentation here. First, let me start with dua, inshallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. ربنا آمنا بما أنزلت واتبعنا الرسول فاكتبنا مع الشاهدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين آمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. All right, before we go into the term or the word, the Quranic expression that we're going to study, I'd like to give you a little bit about the methodology that I'd like to use in this session. Some of you may be familiar with this, or for some this might be quite new. But since this is an important part of the presentation, I'll give you, obviously, I won't be able to get into a lot of details. This is a huge subject on its own, but I'll give you a little bit information about how we will go and try to understand the Quran, the ayats in Quran, the verses, the Quranic verses. And again, I have only a few sentences here, a few expressions, and I'll talk a little bit about those things. And if you're not familiar with it, you may not quite understand what I mean by those, but hopefully when we are talking about the ayats, these will be more understandable, these will make more sense. And also, I'd like for any of you to jump in and contribute the questions and comments as we go along. I know that at the end of the presentation, we'll have a question and answer session. I'd like to have it an interactive presentation, because quite honestly, this is somewhat difficult for me because I do not see the audience, the faces of the listeners. So I do not know if what I tell you makes sense, if you're confused, if you're listening. So if you, I don't know if I can use the text message feature of this program, but I know that you can unmute your microphones and tell us what you think. Please do so. And I'll go ahead and start this. First, about the method. I believe method precedes the essence. What it means is that although the essence, the ultimate objective that we're trying to get is important, and that's what we are after, the method, how we do it, how we go to that objective, target, how we achieve it, is also very important. For example, a very simple example people give is, let's say that ultimately would like to be rich. So we may think that becoming rich is our aim. That's the essence of our objective. But how to be rich is probably more important than that. For example, if you, go ahead and rob a bank, you can be rich monetarily, but obviously a lot of people wouldn't choose that. So when we say we want to be rich, this is just an example. We also mean that we will do it in a certain way, in a certain method or approach, so that, you know, the essence, our objective is justified, or we can easily say that I did it and my conscience is, you know, I'm happy with this. This is how it should be done. So that's why, for me, before we go into the actual ayats, this is important for me. And a couple of the features or principles of this method is, this is my way of saying it. I didn't hear it anywhere else. Maybe some people use it, but for me, this is how I express it. Religious, quote unquote, I should say that, versus human arguments. I'll tell you what I mean by that. When we are religious, in quotation marks, we sometimes, not everybody, obviously, but mostly, we tend to give our arguments, or we say the sentences, we make some statements, and these take a lot of things taken for granted. So we have a lot of ground that is for us given. And at some point, maybe during daily conversation, this might be okay for some, but this habit of ours has a problem. And the problem being is that When we have this taken for granted, oh, we know what we mean by this particular thing in religion, we tend to memorize these things and do not quite understand what they really mean. For example, a religious argument, especially when we're talking about these things in a discussion, a presentation like we're doing right now. Maybe when you are in the masjid and when you are praying, depending on the context in which you're talking, these may be different, but especially when we are studying, so to speak, what religion means, what Quran means, I do not like the idea that we take a lot of things granted. For example, one might say, give you an argument, and when you ask that person, what is your evidence, or how do you know that this is true, we Muslims tend to say that, oh, it's in the Quran. If Allah says that, it must be obviously true. Or the second source that we go to is the hadith. Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said this. So we have these shortcuts. Again, in some contexts, we might need those shortcuts, but most of the time, these tend to be like our quick cheat sheets, which do not quite give us the content, the essence of those arguments. On the surface level, for example, God said so, or there's a verse in the Quran, or there's an hadith on this. At one level, this is true. But when you are arguing for something, and when somebody does not quite understand it, or when you yourself are actually trying to understand what is going on here, as a human being, you need to be given the evidence for that particular argument. And when we say it is in Quran, this is a circular argument, which means that we are bringing an evidence from the source for which we need evidence for. So it doesn't make sense. When I say human arguments, I mean any human being with normal intelligence, who have the ability to understand human speech, obviously, will understand what that argument is, although he may not readily say, oh, okay, I understand this argument and I'm a Muslim now. This is not the point at all. But that argument should be understood at a human level. Any human being, doesn't matter where they're from, which country, what culture, or even what religion. So if our talk is only directed to those people who call themselves Muslims, this is for me a religious argument, and I do not think that this is the way to talk about the Quran or anything related to religion. So instead of saying we Muslims, these ready to use cheat sheet arguments, I'd like to base it on human arguments. Anybody can understand them, and they may or may not agree with it. Still, it should be at their level. So within this methodology, Allah is the conclusion, which means that, as you probably know, I'm not very familiar with your studies, so I don't know what exactly you've covered, but I'm guessing that this is a common thread in what you guys talking about, is when, you know how we say the tawheed, the sentence, the expression is La ilaha illa Allah. That means, the meaning in English is not important, but what I'd like to draw your attention to is the sentence starts with La, which in Arabic means no, or it's a negation. It does not start with Allah, which is contrasting to what I said above about religious arguments. Our religious arguments usually start with Allah. But in Tawheed, in this method, Allah is the conclusion. The first step is negation. And well, actually, if we, and we will at some point during this presentation study that as well, if we go to the shahada, it starts with ashhadu, and then it comes la. Ashhadu an la ilaha. So you start with ashhadu, that means I witness. I witness, for me, the way that I understand it is that I make observations first. I do not say Allah first. I make observations as a human being. Forget about you being religious. That may be true. But for our purposes here, as a human being, first we start making observations. I'm witnessing. What am I observing? Well, everything that is around me, including myself and my immediate environment, and the circles go on and on, reaching the stars. But what I'm observing is what I experience, what I see as a human being. And all human beings have the same capacity. All human beings are in the same condition as me. They exist in this world, and like me, they have ears, eyes, feelings, and they have the world to observe. So the method starts with the ashhadu, the expression, witnessing, and then comes la ilaha. Well, after, again, I'm not going to be able to go into the detail of it. I'm just trying to cover the basics so that it'll make sense when we go into our attempts to understand the Quranic expression I'll share with you. So when after I observe, if you want to use the academic language, after you gather data, you come to the conclusion, or the first premise, that there's no ilah, there's no deity, there's no real cause in this world. If you come to that point after your observation, if you do not, as a human being, look around, observe, and then if you think that things exist on their own, there's no need for you to go on to the second or the last part of this sentence, shahada, illa Allah. Those people who say and come to the conclusion that there is no cause can only go to the last part, which is Allah, illa Allah. So this is how we look at the existence. So in this sense, you might say that this is an existential approach. This is an existential understanding, not the religious one. And as I said, Allah is the conclusion, which comes in the end. After you make the observation, and after your observation, you say that, well, I have not seen, I have not witnessed anything in existence that can be the source of the existence of itself and of the existence. And then you say, or we say, well, there must be a He. Basically, Ilah, Allah, is our conclusion that I haven't witnessed any cause, any doer of the actions that I observe, but since they're there, I cannot deny it, they exist. What is the logical conclusion? The logical conclusion is that there must be somebody who is responsible for all these things that I observe. So that's why who in Arabic, Ilah, Allah, is the logical conclusion that we've come to. So, and the last expression says here, start with the known. I think I've already explained this. You start with the known. You do not start with the unknown. Allah is the unknown. You cannot start with Him. So we have to start with what we know, what we observe. And what we know is ourselves first and everything around us. Any questions or comments so far? Okay. They're somewhat related to this methodology. I'll give you another detail. You know, the ablution, as Muslims, we perform it every day, most probably more than once or twice every day. What does ablution mean, and why we do it every day? Why repeat it? We know what it means, hopefully, or it means something, at least to us, but we do it every day. And again, I do not want to give any religious argument saying that, in fiqh, there is this rule derived from this imam or this madhab that you have to do it. This is a religious argument, and we're not going to do that today. As a human being, the way that you understand yourself, why ablution is necessary, this is number one, maybe. But on top of it, why do we perform it more than once every day? I'll ask you actually at the end of these three questions. I'd like to hear your opinions if you have any ideas. And the same way, you know, we say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We say during the salat, during the namaz. We say probably tens of times during a day, before we eat, before we drink something, before we go out, before we start our car. But we repeat it several times. And the next day, again, several times. Why do we need to repeat these things? What is the purpose? The same way, niyat, the intention, and it's, you know, one of the requirements. So they say, before every salat or before any ritual, actually, before you do anything religiously, you need to, repeat yourself the intention why you are going to do that particular thing. And any ideas? I'm sure.
Bismillah, at least we forget we are entirely dependent on Allah. That's why we say Bismillah with everything.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear the first part because here I'm in Virginia and I opened, my internet a little bit late and there's a lot of time clashing in too. But I just heard one of your questions about the Bismillah. I think that we do it for basically to get the blessings, barakah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the blessings, to obviously, and also we were also discussing a few days back with our friends on another forum that what's the difference between a good act done by a Muslim and a non-Muslim, and the difference is the la ilaha illallah, because everything, whatever we do is, is given in the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the reward, and as the Quran says, those people who do kufr and do good deeds, all their good deeds are void. It's like mirage, or it's like, gone into the air. So for multiple reasons. I'm just answering the question about Bismillah. I didn't hear the other question, sorry.
Okay, thank you for sharing what you think about it. I'm sorry that you were late, but these questions on the slide that you see right now, this was part of the methodology that I was trying to explain earlier. So if you haven't caught that, you may not see the relation. So my objective was not just to understand why we say Bismillah as a Muslim, but this was part of the methodology that I was trying to explain, which hopefully we will use in understanding some verses from the Quran. But thank you anyways, and I hope you will see the connection between this methodology and these questions? Well, for me, the reason that why I included these questions is because we do these things every day, repeatedly, for us renewing our consciousness of who we are, consciousness of our being a mu'min, a believer, before we perform a particular thing in our daily lives. For example, when we say Bismillah, that means that we are intending to do whatever it is that is going to follow. We are going to do it as a Muslim, as a believer, as a mu'min. Well, don't we know already? Think about this. Don't we know already that we are Muslim? We are a mu'min? Of course we do. The same way for all the other questions. For niyat, for example, you know that you're going to perform that particular ritual as a Muslim person, but still it should be there. Yeah. For me, the way that I understand it is renewing our consciousness of why we are doing. So going back to what I said earlier, I think these things are there because so that we do not fall into the trap of rote memorization, saying all these things or doing all these things without the consciousness that need to be there along with these rituals. So I hope this makes sense. Although I'll tell you one more time and go on to the next one. We perform ablution every day because we want to renew our consciousness, and not because that there's necessarily something dirty on myself. That might be the case, but most of the time we're clean physically, but we still do ablution. This is for us to remember why we're going to do the thing that we're just going to do right now. So this is also an important feature of the methodology that I was trying to share with you. Now, I'll also tell you a little bit about meaning, which I believe is an important part of these studies. Since I studied languages, I think this is particularly important for me. And without talking about it, without taking this into consideration, it doesn't make sense to me to read Quran or to do anything that is religious. Human beings are designed to seek meaning and purpose. These are my words, but this is basically common knowledge, I believe. And that is what comforts us. This is also important. Pay attention to these words here. That is what comforts us. It is what completes us. Don't worry about the second part of this. I'll come to that later. But I'll share something with you if I can. Look at this picture and tell me what you think. You immediately look at it and try to make sense of it. You'll try to understand what it means as a whole and what each particular thing in it means for you. What is the purpose of it? And imagine, I'm sure you're familiar with some of these things, and also most likely you will not recognize most of these signs. When I tell you that meaning or purpose is what comforts us, this is what I mean. Look at I don't know, you obviously see some circular gauges here. Everybody knows what they are, so you're good, you're happy with it, you're content with it. But look at, for example, 29. I don't know what it means. If you are mechanically inclined, maybe you do know what it means, but I don't. So for me, for my purposes, when something pops up like this in front of me and I need to make sense of it, and when I can't make sense of it, I'm disturbed. As a human being, I do not understand. I want to understand what it means. Here's my thought process. And I want you to remember, if you can, this methodology, because we will use the same methodology when we're trying to understand the verse. When I look at this, I immediately try to make a connection between what I see and my reality. What does that particular mean to me right now? Obviously, it is there as a sign. And as you all know, signs are there to point to something. Oops. Somebody wants to say something? Okay, maybe it was a mistake. I was talking about signs. The signs are there to point to something other than themselves. This is probably the most basic meaning of what a sign is. A sign cannot point to itself because it doesn't make sense. So it should point to something else out there in real life, in the life or in the existence that I exist in. So I try to immediately make parallels and try to understand what it means in my world, in real world. So for me, for example, which one do I know among these things? Well, number 57 on the left-hand side, I know that there's something wrong with the engine oil because I have experienced it before in my life. And I know the relation between this sign that I see and the reality that is out there. So I immediately make the connection. It means something to me, quote unquote. It means something to me. I'm happy with it. I understand it. Everything's fine. But going back to 29 or to any other number that you do not know, for me, it doesn't mean anything. So I want to understand what it means so that I know the purpose, so that I can act accordingly. So this understanding can only happen when I'll go ahead and give you the English translations of these signs. Obviously, this is a dashboard of a car and all the the signs that it can potentially give you. And if I go down the list, 29, the sign that I didn't understand it says catalytic converter warning. Well, here's what happens now. That sign is translated into a language that I understand, but still, although I understand that it is an English word, I do not necessarily understand what it means. So translating it from one language, one sign language, into a language that I understand is not enough. I still need to understand what a converter is. I honestly, again, do not know what a converter is in a car. I'm not a mechanically inclined person. So I need to understand what that converter is and what it does in real life and what this particular sign means in relation to that thing in my life. This is what I mean when I say that human beings are always after meaning and purpose, and without it, we're not comfortable. And the second part of it, I have a quote here from a book. This is just the beginning, part of a sentence. I did not include the rest of it because only this part is relevant to what I'm trying to say here. This particular person is a secular scientist, so let's call him that. A secular scientist, which means that he is studying, so to speak, the existence and his conviction is that there's nothing else beyond the existence that he observes. So for him, the way that he puts it, he says, as opposed to nature, capital letter, human culture is everywhere meaningful. This is what I mean. Human culture is everywhere meaningful. We always seek meaning. We are always happy with something that is meaningful. Otherwise, it doesn't comfort us. And incidentally, this is where the clash is between science and religion, the fundamental definition of reality. Okay, if you are ready, we can go ahead and move on to the ayat, or the Quranic expression that I was trying to understand. I have two verses from the Quran, and also another dua, and we'll come to it in a second here. And as you can see, the expression that I'm trying to understand is, in this particular verse, is yusallun. The Quranic corpus gives the root word here as sad lam waw, which the word salat comes from. And let's look at this. I'll read the Arabic version first. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. I have included the translation here, the English translation, and I have underlined how this particular translated that word into English. It is bless. As you can see, it says, verily God and his angels bless the prophet. Hence, O you have attained to faith, bless him and give yourselves up to his guidance in utter self-surrender. In normal, regular in our regular lives, this might make sense, this might serve the purpose, but since we're trying to understand, I want us to go a little bit deeper into what it really means, because the first time I have read this, I don't know if this happened to you or not, the first time I have read this verse, or there are some similar verses as well in Quran, and the next one is one of them, and we will come to that. It's in the Surah Baqarah. It didn't make sense. The translation did not make sense to me. What does bless mean? I mean, we understand what it means in English, but I was never happy with this translation, with this understanding. So this actually is the reason why I'm having this conversation, this presentation with you at this point, to understand what this yusalluna ala nabi, what that expression means in human terms that I can understand. In religious terms, or in our way of understanding everything quickly, bless seems to fit the bill. But again, I want us to go a little bit forward, deeper into this. So I have some questions. What does bless mean in human terms? Again, if some of you have missed the first part of this presentation, where I explained our methodology, you may not necessarily understand where I'm coming from into this discussion. So try to make sense of this verse within the framework of the approach that I tried to explain in the beginning. Not religious terms. What does bless mean? The way that I understand in this existence. If you remember the methodological parameters that I shared with you earlier, we need to start with the known. We should not start with our religiousness, with our being a Muslim. That's a different thing. We should start as a human being who just witnesses these things around us. So within these terms, what does bless mean? I want you to think about it. We may or may not give our answers at this point. We will do it later, or if you're too eager to share what you think about this right now, you can do that too. But right now, this is more like us critically thinking about something and trying to go beyond what we think we normally know. And the questions that I would have, if you have an answer to this question, I would say, how do you know How do you know that? Again, the answer is not because it's in the Quran. That's a religious argument. And how can you tell? Where is your evidence? The evidence needs to come from the known. What does salat mean? The actual, not bless, the translation, but the actual word. And some of the questions that I want you to have in mind for now is, when do we perform salat? The way that we understand it, we normally understand it, the prayer. And why? What do we do or say during salat? These are important questions. And why do we do those things? Why do we say those things? What do they mean? Again, meaning in human terms. I'll go ahead and share with you again another verse. It is 157 in the second surah. It is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ulaika alayhim salawatun min rabbihim wa rahmatun wa ulaika humul muhtadun. There are two words that I think there is a relationship in between, and I've underlined those. Again, the meaning or the translation in English says, those are the ones upon whom. Oh, okay, here I have included more than one translation. As you know, these things are very available, accessible online. You can go and look at tons of translations and what they mean in different languages. It's very easy, and these are some of the things that I have collected. Some people translated salawat as blessings, as we have seen in the previous ayah. Some people translate it as prayers and mercy. Some people said blessings and grace. Or one particular translator did not translate it into English. He said just salawat, the Arabic version, the original version of the word. And within parentheses, he gives again, that is to say, who are blessed and will be forgiven. So we have quite a few different meanings here. There's blessing, there's prayer, there's mercy. What else is there? There's grace, and there's being forgiven. The way that I understand it is just people do not quite understand what it means, but they're just making guesses, educated guesses. I'm not saying that they're completely wrong, but to me, it looks like they're just trying to understand what it means. Because I'm not very good at Arabic, but if you go back to the original Arabic version, it says, or the previous one, yusalluna. This is a verb form, and if we take it to mean to say that it means prayer or pray, the way that we understand it, to make salah, to pray, it does not make sense, because in that case, you will be saying that Allah is praying, making salat over the Nabi. Since this does not make sense, but this is what the original word is, since it does not make sense, people change it and say, oh, it should mean bless, I think. Or in the second verse here, they have quite a few various guesses. They think that it is blessing, they think it is mercy, grace maybe, or forgiven, whatever it is. For me, they're just guessing. And I want you to think what this really means. I don't know if I've already said this, but I have some ideas about what it means, but I do not have a certain final meaning, what it can mean, what it might mean. So if somehow together today come to a conclusion, this is what it means, I'll be very glad to know what it is. And again, the last thing I'll tell you about this slide here is the relationship between salawatun al-muhtadun, because the structure of the sentence says, أولئك عليهم salawatun min rabbihim. Okay, there is salawat. Let's put it that way. Salawat from their Lord are upon them, and it goes on. وَرَحْمَةٌ وَأُولَٰئِكَ, and upon them again, هُمُ الْمُهْتَدُونَ, or those are the ones who are muhtadun. Again, whatever that means, and the English translation is rightly guided. So I'm seeing that there is a relationship between muhtadun and salawat. So what is that relationship? Okay, I'll move on if you don't have anything to say at this point. I've looked up online what salat means. Most of it, 99% of what I found, talks about the salat, the rituals, how to do it. There are websites where they talk about, how to teach, how to pray to the kids, and all the pictures that are there. This is what you should do. First, you need to stand up. First, you have to say Allahu Akbar, stuff like that. But I haven't, maybe there are some websites like that. I haven't found a website where they talk about what salat means actually. And one of the websites admits that there's no single clean English equivalent of this word, and it is usually rendered as prayer, as we have seen in the Quranic verses we've studied so far. It is usually rendered as prayer. Sometimes it refers to something else, largely determined by context and actor. So this is where we are right now. And now I'll go into a little bit about what I think I know about what this word means, and I'll share it with you, and hopefully we will build upon it. Salat is, what do we do when we're praying? We first say Allahu Akbar before we start it. So that is called takbir. In English terms, Allah is greater. And next we start reciting Subhanallah. So it is tasbih. And then we read Alhamdulillah. And as you know, these things are required, so to speak. You have to say these things during every salat. You have to say Allahu Akbar, you have to recite Subhanaka, and then you have to recite Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and it goes on. For me, these things are like three most important things that we do during salat. These are like keywords or tag words, so to speak, of what salat is. And to go back to the methodology I was talking about earlier, we need to be able to say these things starting with the known, not starting with a religious argument. So within the existence that I observe. So let me see what I have on the next one. Okay, this is something different. So when do we say actually takbir in real life? What does it mean to say takbir? Allah is greater. If you remember, if you haven't missed that part, I've explained. Oops, someone's joining. Okay, I've explained that. These things, these religious expressions or rituals, should be based on our experience. So, what does takbir in our experience? It is, again, this is a very, very short version of what it means. I know that there are chapters, books about what these expressions mean, but for our purposes here, I'll just give you a very, very brief summary. Takbir basically means in the existence that I have observed, there are small things and big things, but when you go down to the causality, the causation, or the relationship between them, I always see that there is not a necessarily causal relationship between those two. You can say, you can talk about anything at any level. If you are, for example, a biologist, you'll probably look at things at microscopic level. If you are looking at big things, if you're an astrophysicist, you're looking at stars. They're big, they're great. But if, as in the tawheed, the word or the sentence tawheed, the expression, if you have come to the conclusion that there is no deity, there is no doer of action, in my observance, you have come to the conclusion, and you are actually, after you have observed those things in your real life or in your daily life, when you are in front of Allah, so to speak, you are presenting what you have found in your gathering data. And this is the result. Takbir, Allah is greater, anything that I can think of. So it goes also into the topic of Allah being absolute, which will not go here. But whatever we can think of, Allah or the source of the existence should be greater than that. He should be, he shouldn't be of the same nature as I observe myself and everything around me. It should be, his nature is, he should be completely different. And then we also say tasbih, glory to Allah. That means that, again, in similar terms, I see perfection in creation or in existence, and everything that I see around myself are signs. As we talked about meaning and signs, if you remember, there are signs that are there to point to something. So in this methodology, when we say tasbih, we are actually talking about what I have observed in existence and how I observed them. I saw them that they were making tasbih. They were giving glory to Allah. How are they doing it? The way, if you remember the sign that I shared with you, they have a particular meaning where they point to something else. So they are not pointing to themselves, but they are pointing to something else. So whoever took that, I don't know if it was a picture or drawing, whoever produced, let's say it this way, whoever produced that sign, through that sign is telling us that that sign is there for us to see something that it is pointing to. This is what tasbih means. They are always telling us how perfectly everything is arranged in that dashboard, let's say, in our example, how everything is perfectly arranged, and they're there to serve a purpose, and their purpose is to guide us to their source, so to speak. And tahmid, again, if we go through all these things in our lives and in our ritual, we say takbir, tasbih, and then you remember how I said human beings are satisfied with meaning. Tahmid, actually, for me, it means that we are satisfied what we have gotten out of it. In our dashboard example, we are satisfied if we understand, or when we understand, what that particular sign means. The content that you're in, it is called tahmid. Okay, I'm out of it. In our dashboard example, we are satisfied if we understand, or when we understand, what that particular sign means. The content that you're in, it is called tahmid. Okay, I'm very happy, I understand it, my mind is at ease, I'm content with it, and I am right now in this ritual saying that Alhamdulillah, I'm good. There's peace between me and the sign, because I understand what it means. So very shortly, this is what salat should mean, the ritual salat, something that we observe in our lives, and those things, we repeat them during salat. Now, this is also part of, we are going more into the presentation more and more, and we'll be, or at least I'll be finishing soon. But I want you to think again about, this is also part of the salat, the prayer, the ritual prayer, tashahhud. And again, I looked up online and tried to find a website where they explain the meaning of it. But almost all of them, or let's say the websites that I have found, they explain tashahhud as the part of the prayer where we sit and where we recite this dua. But other than that, what does it mean? Why do we do that? I've never seen any explanation. If you have found some, please share it with me. Well, tashahhud, although it is in religious ritualistic term, although it is described as the part of the prayer where you sit, it means it comes from shahada, which we talked about earlier when we say ashhadu. So it is closely related to that. But again, we do not necessarily see this connection. It means witnessing. It means testimony of faith. And what do we say when we make tashahhud during prayer? During salat. We recite this. All of you will remember what this is. It starts with at-tahiyyatu lillahi was-salawatu wat-tayyibat. I again included the English translation, but to me, it's not good. It might give you some ideas, especially if you're not familiar with Arabic. For example, for the first part, it says salutations to God. Again, at some level, I think it can be said, you can say that it's true. But for our purposes, for me, it doesn't make sense much. And then it goes on to salawat, the word, which we have studied a little bit in those verses. It is translated as, again, prayers. And then the tayyibat is good deeds. This is the common translation that I've come across almost everywhere. And it goes on, Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and peace be upon you, O Prophet, the mercy of God and his blessings. And then the third part, Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. What is this? Okay, peace be upon us and the righteous servants of God. And the last part is the shahada, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. For our daily ritualistic religious duty purposes, this translation or this understanding is usually good enough. But I'd like to hear what you think about each word here. Okay, I think I've talked too much. It's 2:15 now. So I'll try to wrap up here and let you ask questions. At-tahiyyatu lillahi was-salawat wat-tayyibat. I'll go into details of these things here. First of all, the first question that I ask myself, who's talking to whom here? And why is he saying these things? If you remember the meaning, the way the language works, you always need to know who's talking, who's doing the talking, and who's he talking to, and what is the purpose of that particular talk, what is the context of it. Without giving this context, this contextual background, language cannot give you any meaning. Every meaning occurs within a context. So these are the questions for us to understand what the context is. These are the questions that we should ask ourselves. Who's saying these things? At-tahiyyatu lillahi. And again, for the sake of going really quickly over these things,
they say that this particular expression is uttered by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the addressee is God, is Allah. This is what excites me about this. So we recite, or we have a text in front of us in which supposedly the Prophet ﷺ is talking to God. So the reason why this excites me is, when I think about it, when I think it to myself, if I see God, so to speak, what would I say to him? And here in front of me, there is an example of that. Somebody is in front of Allah, it looks like, and he is talking to him, and it must be very important. There must be some important clues in it. The way that he addresses, or the first thing, at least the first thing he says when he's in the presence of Allah, these are important clues for me. And look how he, so to speak, greets him. Let's go back to the word salutations in the translation. This is how he salutes him. This is how he greets him. What do we do normally in our daily lives? We say, hi, how are you? Good, I'm fine. How about you? So this is the dialogue we normally have. And look at the dialogue between the Prophet or this person, between him and Allah. He doesn't say, hi, how are you? He says, At-tahiyyatu lillahi. So for me, it is a way of his expressing what he understands by the reality of Allah, how he sees it, how he sees him, how he understands him. So for me, it looks like that he is telling him, or he is describing him the way that he understands him. So for me, this is his proclamation of his understanding of Allah. And what does he say again? At-tahiyyatu. Again, we said this is translated to mean that this is a salutation, but actually tahiyyat, it comes from the word hayat, which means life. At-tahiyyatu lillahi. So if you go back to the methodology I was talking about, you know how we should start with everything that we can observe around us. So this person, the Prophet, ﷺ, is talking about everything that he observed that is alive. And he says, At-tahiyyatu lillahi. So everything, the way that I understand it, he is ascribing the source, or he is telling him that everything he observed around him that is alive is coming from Allah. They are there, or they're alive just because of him. And this is his greeting. This is his way of saluting him. Again, the other one was salawat. As you know, in Arabic, you can also read this, at-tahiyyatu was-salawatu wat-tayyibatu lillah. So lillah will go to each of these expressions. At-tahiyyatu lillah, was-salawatu lillah, wat-tayyibatu lillah. Okay, so when we say was-salawatu lillah, it means on behalf of all those who proclaim takbir, tasbih, and tahmid. And this person should have made these observations in his life before he came here, before he started to saying these things. He should have experienced himself what takbir means in reality, what tasbih means, and what tahmid means. And he is just presenting this understanding in his presence. For me, this is what it means. وَالصَّلَوَاتُ لِلَّهِ. And then he goes on, وَالطَّيِّبَاتُ لِلَّهِ, on behalf of all that is pure and beautiful. It is very difficult for me to go into any more details because I'm tired. You're most probably tired listening to me. So I will leave this to you to understand what does it mean. What does pure or beautiful mean in this context? Anyway, let me go on to the next one. And then comes the response. The response is, Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu. Again, in order to have the context, we need to ask who's talking to whom and why is he saying these things? What does it mean? What is the purpose of these things? And the purpose for me is, this is a response to what is being said in the above sentence, in the sentence above. Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi. Whoever is saying these things, whoever is giving me these meanings, Assalamu alayka, that means that we know what it means in daily life, but it means I agree with you, or I accept what you mean by that. There's salam between you and me. There's salam, or agreement, understanding between how you have presented yourself and my own reality. Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu. And then comes again, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Again, I will leave what those mean to you, your understanding. I believe Isra is going to share this presentation with you later on. You can go back and look at these slides if you like to. But the questions that I have included here, when you say wa rahmatullahi, where did this rahmah come from? Again, do not say the rahmah comes from Allah. Yes, it is true, it comes from Allah, but you know what it means in human terms. And wa barakatuhu, and why is he, or why are we getting this barakah, or the blessings? How does this barakah, or these words, how do they play out in the context of this dua? And last, oh, not the last, there's one more line here. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. Again, who's talking and why is he saying these things? I'll again leave this part to you for the sake of being quick and short here. What does salihin mean? What does ibad mean? Abd, we normally say, oh, we are the slaves of Allah. But what does it really mean? And the last part is ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Now, again, I'll say the same thing one more time, and hopefully I'll be finished. This sentence is uttered, or is said after, if I go back here, after we have pronounced and we have gone through all these things. We have said At-tahiyyatu lillahi was salawatu, and then assalamu alayka, assalamu alayna, and then this is the last part of the dialogue. So we should not consider this as separate from what went before. This is to be understood within the context of what we have said above. When we say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. We talked a little bit about the first part, which is there's no deity but him. But let me tell you a little bit more about this second part, where it talks about the Abd and Rasul Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. Again, if you notice, it starts with ashhadu. In the methodology parameter that I gave you earlier, it corresponds to witnessing, or starting with the known, or building your argument on what you observe in real life. This is what it should mean. وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. If you, again, there's another interesting point here, is that Muhammad, we declare that Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam is first Abd and then a Rasul. So if you're not Abd, you cannot be Rasul. This is an important part. And also I'll ask you, let me see if I put the question here. Okay, how do you know he's the Abd first and then the Rasul? Or even before that question, what does Abd mean in this context? What does Abd mean, and how Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam first is an Abd and then he is the Rasul? Rasul is, as you all know, is a person who comes to us with a message. What was his message? Again, think of these questions within the context I tried to provide you with. All right, this is all for me. I'm sorry if I talk too much. Go ahead and share your comments or questions.
Assalamu alaikum. Just wanted to share, recently I just learned the meaning of Salah. There were 4, and the context of At-Tahiyyat it was that we send, Allah sends, we are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send his mercy, and also to speak about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam close to his inhabitants in the heavens, and to increase his, I should say, to give him more. Every time they send salawat on him to increase him in his rank. And also the meaning, that was the meaning in the context of At-Tahiyyat. But salah also I found out recently that it comes from the word salawan, which refers to hips, like the postures we have. It's basically, the hips are the pivotal, in the literal sense of the meaning. And that's why we keep those postures. So, and the third meaning was, I was told, that it means to roast meat. That is something to bring the meat close to the heat. So we are coming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For this is like the takharrub, And the fourth meaning, which is very interesting for me, that I was told that this word has been Arabicized from another language, root word, which basically means connection and, connecting to the prayer, because you were talking about the definition, that it's very difficult to find a definition on internet. But this I found recently, I just learned, just wanted to share. So the other thing on At-Tahiyyat, you were asking why At-Tahiyyat, the Prophet ﷺ, so this was kind of a royal greeting, unique to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he cannot say as-salam because Allah is as-salam, obviously. So I think the rationale of At-Tahiyyat was this, that, it is kind of a extremely unique royal greeting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And like you said, with consciousness and experiencing the reality. And so that was the point I just wanted to mention. The last question was, I can see the actual question you asked was about what does salawat mean, or what was the last question? I'm missing the slide here. There was one point. So the question is the word salah itself borrowed from some other language? Because Quran does have other, linguistically, words derived from other languages. That question. And I had one more question, which I forgot. I'm going to check back. I don't know. Maybe somebody else will. Slave is a very lousy translation for abd, I believe. It's very comprehensive. So maybe Sister Yamina might comment on that. But that's about it from me. Thank you so much. It was a very enlightening, presentation. I wanted to thank you for your time. And
thank you, Sister.
Thank you very much for this presentation, Brother Mehmet Ali. A number of things come to my mind. I really like that you raised the question of Salah and why Salah onto the Prophet. And this is, I don't have much to share, but it has been in my mind for a while to think that, why is this term that is usually associated with praying, and it always goes from the creature to the creator, but then there are some passages like the ones you noted where it's the creator, it's directly related to the creator, that the creator is doing salah. And so what do we make of that? Coming back to the very first verse you shared from Surah Ahzab, verse 56, Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. We had somebody who commented on the question of what could this mean, that God is God and all the angels are yusallun, making salah on the Prophet, and you also do so. I don't know if Brother Zafar is still here, if he can talk. He doesn't seem to have a mic, but he has typed there this one sentence: everything in existence supports the message of the messenger. I wondered how you would comment on that. I'm assuming that with the angels, he takes angels as representing all the creation, and angels as making salah on the Prophet. Could we think of it as everything in existence supporting the message of the messenger? What would you say to that?
Yeah, it makes sense, and I've read or I've come across that kind of explanation. They're true. I mean, I agree with them. But again, what I'm trying to do is to understand even what those explanation mean in my own reality, in the existence. For example, what does it mean that Allah makes salat on the Nabi, or even what does it mean that Allah is what did you say, supporting the message of the Nabi? These are true. I mean, at some level it makes sense, but what does it really mean? The God, Allah is supporting the message. I'm not asking these questions to be able to get answers right now. We may or we may not be able to do that, but I'm just bringing these up, at least for myself, to think that these are important questions that I need to get to the bottom of these things. Because, like I said, I normally, maybe you don't do that, I normally go over these things and say to myself that, oh, okay, I got it, I've understood it. But as a human being, not as a Muslim, when I stand here in where I am, somebody tells me God supports the message of the messenger. What does it mean in Bloomington, Indiana, that I live in this day and age? Where can I observe it? Or let me put it this way. How can I observe, maybe this is a better question, how can I observe that God is supporting the Prophet? Just some questions to think about.
Thank you. And also to follow up on that, what does it mean for us to be invited to partake in that salawat? You know, there are lots of passages in which,
yes,
God supports the Prophet, and directly the word support or help is used. Again, it needs to be unpacked and witnessed.
Yes.
Still, though, in this particular passage, what is very interesting to me is that I am also invited, or believers are also invited to partake in this. What does that mean for me to make salawat on the Prophet? If he's already supported by God,
yeah,
and the angels are representing God's agency, they are acting through God. So God and His angels are already yusalluna ala nabi. Why am I expected to be part of this? I see Sister Yamina is hand up, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Mehmet Ali. I just have some things that came to my mind. They may not be clearly related, but I don't have time to go into the details. It's just when you just mentioned, someone said everything in existence supports the message sent through the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And so how is this? Let's assume we came to this conclusion that everything in existence makes tasbih and therefore supports the message that is brought through Muhammad ﷺ. How is this related to Allah supports the message? And just now when you asked that question, I thought if everything is making tasbih in creation, then it means that everything is we realize that everything is an ayah, everything is pointing It's a sign pointing beyond itself. It's pointing to whatever we are calling Allah, God. And therefore, we come back and realize that actually who is making everything, who is speaking through everything, who is communicating with us through everything is, eventually we realize it's God. And so the one, when we say everything in existence supports the message by God's will, so he is making them support the message. That's the message actually, as Imam Nursi rahimahullah says, like God speaks through the Quran and through the creation at the same time. And so when we realize that they are speaking the same language, they are conveying the same message, then we understand that actually it is an answer to the question that was asked. I'm not going into the detail. And also it explains why in the Quran it says that God himself, Allah himself is the witness. And we say, how is he the witness then? And then it comes to what Isra just mentioned, which is, how is it to do with me? Why should I then do anything, since God and the angels anyways, yusalluna ala nabi, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. But then if everyone else is doing it, if I'm not doing it, for me, they're doing it does not make any sense. And we come back to the meaning thing. It's only when I understand it that it makes sense. Unless I'm participating in the salat, their salat is non-existent for me. And obviously there is an important connection, or it is relevant. The fact that everything is making this salat is relevant to me, to the meaning and purpose of my life, to the meaning of who I am and what I'm doing here. So they're all connected. And I just thought, just for further, not for today, obviously we don't have time, but there are some clues in the previous ayat, for instance, of Surah Al-Ahzab, which by the way is Surah number 33. In ayah 41 and 42, very interestingly, we're told, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu dhkuru Allaha dhikran kathira wa sabbihuhu bukratan wa asila. So it's about remembering, all you who have believed, remember God with constantly. So again, it comes with the beginning, which was a key point, I think, which is to the repetition, the renewal of mindfulness, the renewal of intentional living and intentional surrendering that needs to be maintained and sustained, and therefore that's why we need the repetition. It's that here is the remembrance, but وَاذْكُرُوهُ ذِكْرًا كَثِيرًا, remember him unceasingly, constantly, and سَبِّحُوهُ. I want to translate it as extol his limitless glory. The receiving nur audience is used to me saying, making the tasbih, realizing that God is beyond any fault that we can attribute to the creation, which means he is beyond any of my perception that is missing the salat, the tasbih, that everything is an ayah, that everything is pointing to their creator, that everything is mirroring and reflecting his divine attribute, therefore that everything is participating in the salat and seeing the malakut. We never talked really about the angels. And then in 43 it says, Huwa alladhi, Huwa here is God. Huwa alladhi yusalli alaykum wa malaikatuhu. So God is the one who makes salat over all of you the mu'mineen, the believers, because only the believers are aware, the others are not aware. And that's why it's important. Wa malaikatuhu, and the angels, so him, and as far he's doing it, how do I understand? Because I see the malakut, the angels are doing it. And why? And why it's very important for us to see this, to participate in the salat, in order to realize that the malaika, the angels, therefore the malakut of everything, is participating in this salat. And therefore, from there, that God himself is making the salat, is because it is this way that he لِيُخْرِجَكُم مِّنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ وَكَانَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَحِيمًا. So this is how we are taken out of darkness into the light, and this is how we get through that iman, that connection, realize that God is Rahim. We get in connection with Rahmah. And it reminded me of, it seems counterintuitive, it's something that we do. So how is God the one who is making salat? It's just because we have let's not say prejudice, but like pre-understanding, we assume things. It's like when we say Allah is Basir, He is the seer, and our seeing is so limited and so, so very limited, very tiny. It's a unit of measurement so that we understand what Basir means, but we don't really understand it, but it points to it. Our seeing is only a sign to his seeing, and our hearing is a sign to an indication, but not of the same nature of his hearing. He is also the shakur and the shakir. He is the one who appreciates everything. And so our gratitude is a form of appreciation, and it is a sign to God's name, Shakir and Shakur. And so it is for this salat as well, inshallah. Just wanted to share what came to my mind while you were talking. And thank you so much. There's so many very significant points here. But I pointed to Ayah 41 to 43, actually 44, تَحِيَّتُهُمْ فِيهَا, there is a tahiyya there, and 45, the Prophet ﷺ was sent as shahidan. So there is just a very beautiful, very passage from the Quran, and very packed with treasures and very meaningful messages, inshallah. Thank you.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum.
Just 1 second, Sister Esma. Jazakumullah khair, Sister Yamina, for giving us additional things to think about and feel. The larger context of the verse also connects interestingly. That's really interesting. One of the chats that we just came in also says, God is also mu'min, al-mu'min. I think it's making reference to shakur. Again, something that we tend to associate only with the creatures. The creature is the one that's grateful to the Creator. But interestingly, in the Quran, God is referred to as shakur, as Sister Yamina said, and also as Brother Zafar just noted, he is also mentioned as the mu'min, the believer, which is very interesting to think about. I had a question regarding, maybe this is just a footnote, side note. Is there a significance, Sister Yamina, of the ala as a preposition there? Yusalluna ala, so that I'm not trying to shortcut, but the other forms of salah in the Quran, where it is more identified with the abd, with the creature, it doesn't have that additional preposition of ala. Just yusallun, hafidun ala salawat. But
we say sallu ala nabi, so we are supposed to make salat ala nabi.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like in the salah to God, we don't say salah ala Allah, but when it's the Prophet, sallu ala nabi. So it's still, and I'm not trying to shortcut, it's still salah isn't something that we need to understand in this relation to the Prophet, but at least it's not exactly the identical verb, because it has this additional onto, like you pray to God, but pray onto the Prophet. And God prays onto us, not to us. Is that something to be noted?
Sorry, I couldn't get the question. Maybe I'm not focusing.
So, and this may be just a side thing. I think the main issue is to understand what salah means. I'm just saying, for the initial reading, when we get confused, how come I pray to God? Why would God pray to me? But here it's not saying pray to the Prophet. It's saying pray onto the Prophet. Still, we need to understand. So I'm not trying to shortcut that part. But I pray to God. I don't pray onto God, but I pray onto the Prophet. That ala is additional in this context. You're muted. I don't know if you're speaking.
Yes, you know.
Just 1 second. I wanted to hear Sister Yamina's response. She's muted, so I'm not sure if she's talking.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were commenting. I did not realize you were. I'm still asking. Sorry.
So is that something significant to know, that there is an additional preposition whenever it's from?
Yeah, it changes the meaning when you have a preposition.
All right, thank you. So anybody else who wants to?
Yeah, just wanted to. I was reflecting on this, you know, while you guys were discussing. That basically deep down in my heart, I think that we are told to do the salawat on the Prophet, and the angels also do, because like Sister Yamina said, the Prophet's designation is nothing can top that, because he came with Quran, Allah's speech for the whole mankind, and he took us out and he saved us from, inshallah, from hellfire, and that's a big designation. And that's a huge thing, you know, nothing can be greater than that. And because of that reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Quran also tells us that we should love the Prophet more than ourselves. And that's the reason, because he has saved us from the hellfire, inshallah, you know. And so I think that's the huge thing, and that's why constantly warafana zikrak also. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all the angels, and he sends salawat on the Prophet, because nothing could be greater than that. And to your point about, I was told also that we don't send our salawat on the Prophet, doesn't go directly to him, because we are not in position. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it goes through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That means we give it to Allah, and Allah sends the salawat, because he's the best one who could send the salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it doesn't go directly, I think. I mean, this is very fine. You know, I don't know if it's correct or not, but Allahu alam. But this is what the rationale is, why it is Allah. You know, that it goes through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and our salawat goes to Allah, and then he passes it on to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because that's the best way to send salawat to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
I also wanted to note that I appreciated the tahiyya connection and looking at that prayer in tashahhud, Brother Mehmet Ali, because we say it all the time, and when you went over it, I had read something similar in more detail and inside Nursi as well. When you look at it, so actually profound, but then when we mumble it through the prayer, it is such a. I felt ashamed the way in which I tend to butcher this dua just by only mumbling it, whereas it is actually a very profound way of being human in the world. That, you know, your reference to how would I greet God? What would I say? And then the Prophet is greeting God, saying "At-tahiyyatu lillahi." You know, all the every living being, because tahiyya, hayy, connected to hayy, the living beings. Everything that's alive is praising you, and that's what I brought to you. And with salawat and all the tasbih and glorification. That's what I'm coming to you with. And at-tayyibat, you know, everything that's pure and beautiful, which means everything that we look at without ghafla, without forgetfulness, is beautiful, in the sense that it is pointing to the Creator. It is a sign, even if sometimes they're painful. They are pure and beautiful insofar as they point to our eternal Maker. So this notion of the Prophet coming in with the prayers and the praises of all existence before his Creator, and then as a response getting this salam, this peace be on you, and the mercy and the blessings. Why? And you asked the question, why all of a sudden Rahmah came into the picture, but what else could come? I mean, I think that matches perfectly the moment we realize that everything in alive and everything in the universe is praising the Creator. If we can become part of it, as Sister Yamina said, as the moment we can see that and we participate in that, then what comes is rahmah, what comes is compassion. You feel the compassion and the blessing. That is what it means to be a fulfilled human being, a complete human being, as you were saying in the beginning. And then in response to that, the Prophet takes on that peace. He says, okay, just give us peace, we take it, we receive it, we're happy with it. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. So that's a really profound conversation and exciting. And then ending with Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. My ending in that declaration, in that interaction, is to witness once again that there's only one God. Nothing else is worthy of worship. Nothing else is source of power or beauty. And then the Prophet again comes into the picture, because it's through him that I get to glimpse this reality. And then, as you said, he's abd first, and then Rasul, servant and slave, completely surrendered, and then he becomes the messenger. And this is a conversation that we take part in, or supposed to take part in every ritual prayer. And it's so embarrassing that we just, I tend to mumble through this rather than just being part of it. But I can see how beautiful and meaningful and fulfilling prayer could be if we could bring some of these meanings to life, into the prayer itself. Then you understand all these different friends of God and prophets and people like Imam Ali really enjoying the prayer, the salah, because they are really genuinely taking part in this conversation. So thank you for reminding that again. I see Sister Yamina's hand, please. I think you're muted, Sister Yamina.
Sorry, I did not intend to raise my hand.
I'm sorry. And I see a verse posted. The angels also ask for forgiveness for everyone on earth. Verse 5, Surah 42, verse 5. What could that mean? Yes, Brother Mehmet Ali, what could that mean?
All I can say at this point is a good question that we need to think about. I can't, obviously we can't go into detail, but we should consider it in the context of what we talked about today. And as you can see, there are so many different verses of the Quran, or the messages from the Quran, that we can relate to after we understand the verse that I shared with you, the way that it should be understood. All these different doors start opening.
Thank you. I actually asked the question, but I know that we don't have the time to unpack it. It's just to attract our attention to what's going on in the Quran, that if we take that attitude or approach that Mehmet Ali shared with us at the beginning, of taking things for granted and just recycling the conclusions and cheating, actually, because we never actually confirmed anything. We didn't make tasdeeq. We are supposed to say Sadaqallahu al-Azim, like I witness and I confirm, and this is the truth. But we never did that, and we just used them to recycle and say, yeah, this means this, which is just saying nothing new. And when we come to things like this that are unfamiliar, like for instance, the angels asking for forgiveness, the angels praying for everyone, then we stop, because all the things that we were using, it just means this and it means that, repeating what we heard without understanding doesn't work anymore. And so they are good questions to start us on a path of looking for evidences in inshallah, and trying to really witness, really observe, because we cannot witness what we cannot observe. And the word in Arabic, as we always repeat, is the shahada is the witnessing and the mushahada is the observing. They come from the same word. We can't witness anything that we have not observed first. And we cannot therefore confirm the truth of the message of the Quran. So thank you so much for pointing that out, Mehmet Ali.
Thank you very much for all the explanations. What you said is very relevant. You said that you didn't know if it was going to be relevant or clear. To me, at least, it made sense, and I made the connections in my mind. It was clear and relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Jazakumullah khair, Br Mehmet Ali, for presenting today and sharing with us. Jazakumullah khair for Sister Yamina and others who shared comments. And this marks as our last session, online Quran session of the season. With the end of Ramadan, we are going to take a summer break, and inshallah, may you have a blessed end of Ramadan, and may the Quran become clearer and source of light for all of us in the rest of our journeys until we meet again.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah kulli khair.
Okay, so Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you very much.